Welcome everyone, thank you for having me. My name is Robert Axelsen. I'm going to talk today about command line. By show of hands, those of you honestly who don't know what the command line is, just show your hand. Cool, 2, nice. 2.5. That was a joke. Okay, cool. So this is meant to be, it looks exhaustive on the list, and I'm not sure how long it will take. Let me check the time, okay. But I don't think it'll be as exhaustive as it looks like. We'll cover some things that I use on a bi-daily basis, and we'll go into short detail of what the command line is and maybe why you should use it. I'll give you actually a little bit of info at the end about how I made these slides, because that's also an interesting story. They look a bit different from the slides I've had recently, so I'll get to that. But yeah, my name is Robert Axelsen. You can find me on most things as @RobAxelsen. Coincidentally, I also have everywhere on all the things. So I'm on all the things. But those are mainly aliases for now. Rob Axelsen is where I actually am. I'm a self-taught developer, like we talked about earlier. I'm a speaker. I'm a meetup organizer. I'm a community enthusiast. And then there's a long sentence there, but all I want to say is that I love it when, just like today, when code and people come together. And I love to get to know people, help people learn to code, and be amongst other geeks and code enthusiasts. Awesome. So, as I said earlier, this talk is by no means meant to be exhaustive, and I hope that if you realize something at part of the talk, you're like, oh yeah, but he should mention this, or that's wrong, or whatever, feel free to mention it to me afterwards, or even better, commit a pull request, because the talk slides are already online. And this is meant to be mainly for beginners, people that haven't really opened a terminal or the command line before, or if you're a little bit familiar, but you're like not sure why you should use the command line more, or you're a bit too scared, or you're like, okay, now's the time to maybe get better at this. I'm going to try and give you a jump start. Yeah. One thing that I think we should make clear first is in terms of the command line. The command line is just the opposite or an alternative to the GUI, the graphical interface that you use to do stuff on your computer. You might go to YouTube to watch videos. You can also download YouTube videos from the command line with commands, for example. You might like to use graphical tools when you are committing your source code, meaning you're creating some code or you're programming something, and you have a visual tool that helps you keep track of all of that. You can do that from the command line. You can play games on the command line. You can do all sorts of things, but for me, it's mainly a way of being more productive. And as it becomes muscle memory, it also feels like it looks to others like I'm having magical powers, and it kind of feels like that sometimes as well. Because if you make the effort and it becomes part of your routine, there is an initial steep learning curve, for sure, depending on what you're using the command line for. But if you're willing to give it that, give that an effort, you will benefit from it. And also, some of this is stuff that you will eventually have to know as a developer. Normally, if you are using an IDE or you're in a company where you have like IntelliJ or some IDE which does almost everything, and you just have some terminal inside the IDE, okay, maybe you won't really have to know so much. But at some point, it will only benefit any developer or programmer to know some stuff about the command line. And some of the stuff we're sharing today will just be basic stuff that will help you a bit if you don't know it from before. Command line can mean many things, and there is a command line in Windows. I won't go into that unless you install, what's it called, Bash for Windows or something like this, where you get basically a Linux interface in Windows. You will, sorry?
Sigwin is the name.
Sigwin, okay. Cool. And you will also benefit from this talk with some, not disclaimers, with some exceptions. Most of this stuff will work on Mac as well, because Mac is also Unix-based, BSD-based. I just included some stuff mainly from Wikipedia here in terms of what Unix is. But it is, in essence, an operating system that there are current operating systems that are derived from. It's a simplification, but that's all you need to know. And one thing to mention, which we won't go into depth on today, but which you might notice later on, is that Unix has a philosophy of having modules for everything, and every program or tool should be really good at what it does. And then it can be chained or combined with other commands or tools, and they together will do the job really brilliantly for you. I won't go into any advanced examples, but if you're interested in that kind of way of controlling your computer from the command line and benefiting from that kind of philosophy, that's a whole different talk topic. But it's just nice to know. Not so much about Bash, other than that we will, at the end, I'll go through a little bit of demo. Feel free to save questions till the end, because of the talk, it's not so easy to, with the recording, it's not so easy to have questions live. So please keep them in mind. Bash is a shell and command language, meaning the command line that you get up on Linux or Mac will be Bash-based. And the commands you give outside of using a tool or a certain command with some options, those will be Bash commands. It's called Born Again Shell, and it's enough said. There's a great resource if you want to go into how to customize your Bash and make your command line look different, or program in Bash or whatever. There's a great GitHub resource which is called Awesome Bash, where there's tons of resources. These commands that I've listed here, Control-R, Control-A, Control-E, Control-L, and clear, those are the ones that will make you the most productive in terms of using Bash. Those are Bash-centric, meaning Control-R takes up all the previous, it has the history, your Bash history, all the commands you previously have done in the command line, I think by default of the 1,000 last commands. Then you can basically search in them. As you start Control-R and start typing out, it'll give you the last command and then a history of the previous commands you've done that started with the same thing. Control-A makes you jump to the front of the line you're on, and Control-E to the end. Feel free to code along or do this, but the slides are also online, so you don't have to write down something. Control-L is the same as clear. It clears the screen. You can also write clear. Just write clear, enter, and it does the same job. Before we start, just know that a good habit to get from the start is the man pages. Meaning, most every, for example, Linux tool, command line tool, will have a manual page, man page. And you can normally just do man and space and the program or tool that you are wanting to get more information on. So we talked about Bash. You can even do man bash, and you'll get tons of information. It starts with a title, description, example, or the syntax, and it gives you the options and maybe some examples for those options. Options we'll get a little bit into later, but that's not really stuff you have to get so familiar with just to get familiar with the command line. Git, as we talked about earlier with GitHub, that's a version control system and the most popular one to date by far. This is where you keep track of all the versions of the programs you write. If you code something, you might do something today, you commit it, meaning you save it. You save it locally, but you can also choose to save it, for example, at GitHub or a private repository, so it's only available for you, but you know that if your computer crashes, it's still there, and you can pull it down. This also makes it easier to collaborate with other people, so that you can push your code, they can take that code down to make changes and simplify it, but that's parts of what this tool does. And all this you can do from the command line. Sometimes you start with git init. There's a lot of code here. We'll go through commands here. We'll go through some of the things together later. And I know a lot of this is just throwing stuff at you, and it might be wow. But my goal partly is if you remember 10% of these things, and then you're in a situation where like, I think I can do. That's hopefully helpful. Git init, you're starting a new project. Often, if you're starting to learning to code, you do git clone instead, because you're putting down someone else's code. Then you normally get familiar with git status and git add. Git status shows you a really good overview and often gives you suggestions about exactly what you should do in that case. Git add lets you add new files or change files that have been changed. You add them to the staged environment, but let's not get into git specifics. And git commit, that command means that you are storing the new version of your source code with a message that should be descriptive of what it does. And git push is when you're pushing it to locally or normally a remote place where the code lives. But these are the codes that 80% of your normal working day with Git, unless you have like a advanced workflow in your company or with your open source project, that gets you very far. Maybe to give some context, if I do this, I have a terminal window here that I use that is a drop-down. We can show you how to open one normally on Linux afterwards. When I talk about the command line, this is what I'm talking about, just to give some visuals if it was unclear. Then we can create files and directories from the command line. So the easiest way is the touch command. Again, if you're curious, to give some more context, I can do man touch, and it gives me information about what this command does for me, right? So it changes the file timestamps, but we can use it to create files. It has options, as you see here. It has the description, and it has the options, and it gives us information about what they do. And it says you need to touch, and you can do an option that's optional, but you need a file name. Yeah. So if we touch a file, if that file doesn't exist before, it creates the file. It's an empty file. There's like no bits. It's just an empty file. And that's helpful sometimes, but sometimes you want to create a file because you already know what you want to put in it. So from the command line, you can use bash syntax of echoing out, and then in strings, whatever's going to be there, and then you direct it to that file. And that file will then have that content. There are text editing tools in your command line, the simplest one probably being nano, because you can follow instructions and stuff. We'll get to another one later. So you can also just do nano file tree, and then you're opening a file, and then you get instructions on how to save it after you've put some information into the file. It's not so important to know the differences, but I'll mention that this one overwrites everything in a file, and this one lets you always append. So if there is something already existing in file 2, this means that this will be added to it. Vim, I won't go into detail today, but it's a more powerful editor than Nano. Some people, myself included, use it to program all day long. So it can be a fully functional and more than enough productive IDE for you if you want to program. To make a directory, you use mkdir, mkdir. And one thing you'll use more often, if at anything more than that, is the p-op flag, the p option, which just lets you make more than one directory at once. Because if you try without the flag, it'll say that directory you want to create a directory inside doesn't exist. So, yeah. And now that we've created directories and files, we maybe want to have a look at them. So ls gives us a simple overview of where we are and what files are available. And ls, again, with options. So you see here is an example of some tools lets you have options or flags like LAH together. Some of them enforce you to have a dash in front of all of them. There is a bit of inconsistency between commands and tools, unfortunately. So it's good, again, to check the man pages. If there's one thing you remember today from this talk, if you get confused in the command line, there's something you're supposed to use, just do man before the command and see what happens. You can get a lot done just by looking in the local information you have available for you. LAH is an example of list them not just in a row, but as a list the files as a list. ls lists all the file in your current directory. A,
show hidden files.
Thank you, list all, A for all. And H is human readable. So if you get sizes in bits, and you're like, how many megabits or whatever is that? then you can use that option. cd ... when you are already, we go into this directory. So we have a directory mydir hello. We can do either cd mydir, then again cd hello, or we can do the / because it's my hello is a directory in mydir. Once we're in there, we use the ... to go one directory back. And we can do /... to go 2 directories back, or 2 levels. And then we can do that infinite, like as many times as we have. Like, there are some file system limitations, I think, but I don't think you'll run into them. I think it's more long file names. Find is the simplest command that is always there to find a file. So / will find everything in your computer, and the name denotes what you're looking for as the name. And the ... is from your current directory and downwards, or up, downwards, upwards, whatever, I don't know. At least inside that directory, in all the directories inside that directory. And one thing, I maybe should put a resource here, but if you want to install a tool that makes your life easier in terms of find, just install ACK. And help me remember this, you can also do FCF, which is a fuzzy finder, which you can replace the Control-R with this. And it's even more powerful in terms of finding not just your history, but it has also other combinations of stuff where you can find based on file name. To confuse you less, fuzzy finder just means you don't even have to type out the full name. You can, like, if something is cat pick, I can write ctpc. And because that file name contains those, I can do quicker, like a fuzzy search. Manipulating files. I will get to some examples afterwards. It's getting really tough now, but bear with me. Getting back to the touch command, if you do the option D, you can specify, actually, now we don't want to create a file. We want to take an existing file, and we want to give it a new timestamp, meaning we created it 4 weeks ago, but for some odd reason, we want to make it appear that we created it 2 hours ago. So then you can just specify a file, and you can do touch with the flag D for a date stamp, I think. And then you can even specify in like clear tags 2 hours ago, and you can also do date formats, and then the file you want to change. And then in, like both on Linux, or if you copy it to Windows, it'll appear as if it was created, or no, as if that was the last time it was edited, modified. RM removes a file. RM, don't play too much with RM if you don't know what to do. You can do stuff like RM, RF, which removes and forces and don't ask you for confirmation. And then you can do the / like we just looked at earlier, the whole computer, and then then you're going to have a good time. But RM on its own, specifying one specific file, unless you use an asterisk, should be fine. Manipulating files, we had that in the previous slide, but you can then, with this redirect, you can only append. So you're updating this file to have a new line with more content. Again, nano is useful if you want to change files. You can change the file name with just mv, which is its own, again, Unix philosophy. mv does one job really good. It's good at moving files, changing names, doing that stuff, really good. That's what it does. It's always there for you. Man mv, you get all the options. So you move it, and then you can change the name. So the existing name and the new name. You can copy a file. So this would move it. File 2 would be gone, and file new name would be there. Copy would then copy this one and copy it into file 3, and both of them then exist. And a nice trick, if you do backups, and you often like, oh yeah, I just want to back up this file and change it, like config files or whatever, you can do copy file 2, and then you do some, don't quote me on this, but I think this might be Perl magic, so it might not be fully bash, but you do the curly brackets, comma, dot backup. Means that it could take some parameters before the comma, but now we don't give it anything, so we're just saying take the file name that you have and create a new file with that same file name plus dot backup, .bkp, for example. So if you use that and you get it in your fingers, you have a quicker way of copying a file if you always want to do like .bak or bkp or whatever for backing up that file. So you know if you make changes and you want to revert, you can just, yeah. Vim. I think I have to show some stuff here, because if I just do, if I just vim like file 1, right? This is a text editor. Okay. What do I do now? Like, this is really not apparent. Like, I'm just clicking random buttons now, and suddenly something happened because I clicked the button I, which means insert mode. If I do escape, I can do a colon, and I can do commands here. I can do help and stuff. So it's not the most intuitive editor, but it's really feature-rich. The best way to get familiar with it is just to go help, vim tutor, and then you get a file which leads you through, like, do this way and try this out stuff and do it on this file, and you learn as you go along. But I don't want to spend too much time on this, but maybe one thing to just remember really good is that I don't manage, so there you go, is that if you want to escape this, let me just blow this up, you literally just have to remember Q, and you might have to remember exclamation mark, because if you don't, because if you don't, then it'll tell you you did change. Oh yeah, it will work if it was empty. So it will work now. Woohoo. But if I did a change, it won't work because there was you changed something in the file since you last wrote to it. So then the safest way is to always know that it's colon, Q, enter, and then you're safe, because then you can exit Vim. You learned today how to exit Vim and use man pages. I think that's more than enough as a takeaway. And the escape key is your friend. I've gone so far as I've switched permanently my escape and caps lock key, because caps lock is closer to my finger. It's, pardon the French, sucks when I use someone else's computer, but it works. Or someone else uses my computer. We'll actually do some of this example in the end. I have to get up the IP address because I have a server ready for us. I just want to mention that for some of you, when you get into the backend, or if you do some coding, you want to put your code somewhere, you might have to deal with another server. But the command line is just, the server is mainly just you interfacing with another computer, and you do it most often, like 98% of the time, via the command line, unless you're on Windows, for example. And the stuff that you do on the server is often a lot of the stuff you would do on your normal computer if you use the command line. So this is an example of going SSH, meaning we're connecting a tunnel through a server, secure connection, where we can then use the command line locally, but through the SSH tunnel on the other computer. Tmux is a great tool that enables us to, if we just do some stuff in the server and then we close the connection, we go back again, the last session we had is gone. Tmux, a great tool like GNU Screen, lets us open a session that we can close, and then we close the SSH connection, we go back to the server, we can continue where we left off. You can also use Tmux locally because it lets you split the screen in your terminal different sections, and it can be a good workflow tool. But it's nice to know that you can do that. And then Vim again, you could, for example, have a workflow where you connect to a server. You do Tmux to set up a session. You do Vim to code some stuff. You leave it there, you go away. You can connect back in 2 days, and hopefully the session is still there, unless someone screwed with a server or it went down or whatever. And Control BD just lets you, when you're in Tmux, detach from that session. Then you do Tmux attach, unless you have already more sessions. And then you can do Tmux ls, which is ls for list, and you can see if you have more sessions. And then you can selectively choose which Tmux session to go back into. But this is more advanced, but now you know that that's stuff you can do, I guess. Process management, and now we're on 14 of 17 slides. There's not so much left. Awesome. There's a great tool that is not so often known about, I think, that's called PIDOF. So let me take a step back. In your Mac or your Linux, there's processes running. I don't know so much about the Windows world there, but there are processes, but they're managed differently as far as I know. So here, you would want to, for example, close down your Firefox that broke, or Google Chrome, or your video player. Like, oh, stuff froze, what happened? Then you can go and have a look at, For you to instruct the computer on what to do, you normally need the process ID. A PID is just the process ID of something. A program, like Google Chrome, for example. You can just do PID of program instead of having to do PS AUX and more advanced tools to find and then grep for and stuff. Like, if you just want to do simple stuff, PID of does a great job. It just finds you the PID of a program. Then you get a PID, like an ID, a number. Then you can kill that number, that ID, that PID, that program. And then normally it just closes down and maybe your computer unfreezes. This is simplified because you would go more into depth in system administration stuff, like keep track of stuff and have an idea of what have been sleeping and halting and like what is hogging the most memory and the processors, power, whatever it's called. Top is a nice tool that's always there. But if you do use Linux, or I think it's available with Homebrew, you can use HTOP, which is an even more simple graphical user interface for managing this a little bit more with like F3 and F10 and searching, and makes it simpler for you. But it's still in the command line. Maybe, yes. I'll show you this first after, or actually, the last thing we'll demo. Remind me to tell you about IronCat. It's a great surprise to finish the talk. You don't have to just be serious and sysadmin with the command line. There are great resources, and I mentioned these guys before, Hack5, HAK5. They've been around forever. They have tons of great videos, not just this playlist, but tons about if you want to get more familiar with the command line. They're great at explaining stuff. They keep it simple, maybe just a couple of commands per video. It's really nice. This talk was made in Vim. So you saw before the talk, maybe we had some like last minute, like, whoa, some stuff. I fucked up some, pardon my French. I managed to mess up with some stuff. So this talk is created in the command line. The first time I do this because I wanted something where I can just do that. It's an index.html file that I'm just modifying in Vim. And it's remark.js, which is a library for doing slides in your browser. And you just write markup. So you see it's an HTML file with some stuff on top. It imports some fonts. Then at the bottom, it will then take the script needed for the JavaScript. So the slideshow script is this remark.js. But in between here, all I'm writing is the content of the stuff that you saw now. The whole talk is here, starting with the talk contents, and it's written in Markdown. My plan is to get a little bit more experience with this and maybe add my own style. But I really liked it this time around. The slides are available in our repo for FCC freeCodeCamp Vienna, and remark.js you can check out. So I think we'll start by just having a short demonstration. We've gone a bit longer than I thought, so we'll keep it short. But we'll go to the server that I put up for us. We'll connect to the server, and we can play around with some commands. And then we'll try IronCat in the end. And after the talk, feel free to ask questions while I still have the stuff up. We can show something quickly if there's something related. So now I'm just, don't let that confuse you, but let me SSH, like we had a command example, into a server. Is it big enough? Is that good? So now I'm connecting to a server in a data center in Frankfurt. So this is not my computer anymore. And here we saw the example of, for example, using tmux. So I can use the clear command. I can use write stuff, Control L. That's bash stuff. I can write stuff here and jump to the front, jump to the end. I can write some silly commands. And then next time I do Control R, but that might not work this time around. Oh, it does. It shows us that the last time we started with D, we wrote DSF. So I can do the same one again. tmux. I won't show you that here then, because I remember now I was in the process of reinstalling it when my kid was hungry, so I didn't install it on the server. It will take a while because we have to update the whole cache here, but I'll show you tmux afterwards. And we could use Vim here to just, I think we'll take a step back and don't do that because we'll use it locally. We did do the server stuff. We connected to the server. I'll show you tmux. Yeah. Let's just go locally for the sake of example. Let's pretend I'm on the server now. I can do tmux. You see there's even a command, there's even like a graphical thing down here with some information. This might be some modifications here in my configs. But now I can do control, like I can do some stuff here, right? I can do like, I can even open a Vim session. And then I can do, yeah, you see their stuff here, right? This is a list of the files there. Now I can control BD. I'm out again, and I can do stuff. You know, I can even close this window and stuff. And then I go back. If I don't do anything else, it goes back to the. It doesn't go back to the same place. So tmux. So it tells me there's a window open, and then I can go tmux attach t0, and now we're back to where we were. So this stuff is still running in the background. Normally, if you close the terminal, it's gone in the Unix world. We can see, for example, PID off, and we shouldn't do it on Google Chrome because it's a bad example. It has a lot of Chromes here, a lot of tabs and stuff. I think it's maybe stable. Let's do Google. Doesn't work. Let's do PID off tilde. OK. This terminal that you're seeing now is called tilde. I knew it was there. It gives us a this one. Let me just check if there's some stuff I don't want to close here. It's fine. So if I now do kill this one, the terminal is gone. Whoa. It actually did what we told it to do. And because I killed it, I have to take it up again. So. OK, that was one example, just to show you a different one that you can. This is still the command line. This does the job of telling us all the programs that are running here. I can even search for Google. Gives us the one on top here. And I can kill Google Chrome now. And this is easier because you see the shortcuts down there. And this is easier to navigate around, especially if you're new to the command line. I think we'll just create a file, and then we'll do the IronCat, and we'll finish. So I am here now. I'm listing out all the files here. I'm listing it in a better format using flags, so we can see the size in a human readable way and so forth. Then I want to go and make a directory. I do my dir hello, but it tells me you cannot create it because my dir doesn't exist, so we use the flag we talked about earlier. Now there exists my dir hello. Is this too small maybe? Now we're here. Now I can touch a file. So there's nothing here now. I can touch a file. Now there is a file living here. I can touch file 2 and 3 and 4. Now there are more files here. I can list them like this. And then I can do echo. This is awesome. And I can put that into file 1. There's another command that lets us just print out everything in the file to the screen. So we see this has now, this is awesome. Then I want to have another file, another line in that file, and it shows us this file contains these two things. And we can figure that out again with Vim. So it shows us now we can edit this stuff, and I can add a third line. Awesome, it's there. So I'm using the command line. I'm just using the stuff that you saw earlier. It might seem like magic when I'm doing it. And I'm even using Control A to go back here, del using Vim, and I'm doing that, right? It's not that complicated. It just needs to practice, and it's in your fingers. I think we're good to end now on a good note. If you don't have IronCat, won't always be there. You have to install it. You have to install this program. I'm sure it's on Homebrew on Mac. It's on Linux. and you get a nice IronCat in your command line. It has colors and stuff. It's awesome. This is something you can do, especially if you do like a full screen like this. You open up a terminal, you put it full screen, you put an IronCat on your colleagues or friend's computer. Don't tell me I did it, and I'm not endorsing this in any way. This is not blah, blah, blah. And you can just leave the screen. They're like, what the? You can also go to nyan.cat.com. No, nyan.cat. And gives you a nice screen. So I think that's it. Thanks for your attention. And yeah, thanks.